Jim Stewart. I'm Rick Collins, and this is Off the Bench.
We really have been talking with Rick about age in the NFL, age in sports, period, and it seems with the way science and technology and training is going, that age is starting to expand when it comes to, we see more players in their late 30s, early 40s playing at a high level. Let's start out with Tom Brady, since that was a huge topic of discussion this offseason.
Well, I mean, you looked at, we were seeing the commercials for this TB12, his new logo, his new brand, and it's involving
nutrition
and training. Yeah, and just trying to stay in shape when you're after your prime. And it's amazing to see what he's been able to do on the field, so it must work.
And his philosophy is totally different than you would figure from normal hardcore trainers. His is flexibility and muscle softening. Everybody who's been an athlete goes, you don't train to soften your muscles.
What is muscle softening?
I have no idea. We're going to have to dig a little bit more into that, but it sounds like it allows them to not have such rigid movements. It allows them so that when they get hit, last chance of tearing and able to absorb more hits, though I do think it really doesn't protect the bones as much.
Probably helps to have a good offensive line.
It does. But I think you're absolutely right. I think he's really, I think this is a combination of stuff that works and also a way for him to make money in his older age based on his age. He goes, oh, I'm older than most quarterbacks do when they retire, and I'm still playing at a high level. Let's create something that lets everybody know why, when probably most of it is genetics.
Well, probably genetics and the fact that he just generally takes care of his body, and when you're paid to take care of your body and you do it right, there are players who have played into
There's
their 40s.
A reason why they say treat your body like a temple. What you put into it, you get out of. So if you're out eating at McDonald's every day, you're probably not going to have a long, physically active career.
No.
And there's been some studies coming out that said that, obesity in the U.S. has risen quite a bit. But they say a normal person who is healthy otherwise but is overweight in their 30s, by the time they retire, is going to cost not only the person but the government $36,000. The U.S. economy, $36,000 per person to be able to get the hospital bills and everything that comes along with all the detriments of having that overweight, whether it's carrying weight your body's not supposed to have.
So they're costing themselves and costing all the people around them, unfortunately.
But in a lot of ways, everybody says that, but more money goes into doctors, more money goes into nutrition, and more money goes into equipment. So yes, it's going into the economy. It's just not going into the sectors that really have a lot of turnover when it comes to people spending money. If it went into food or went into stuff, that has a lot of turnover when it comes to cost and product and revenue. But when you go into doctors and equipment for that kind of stuff, it's sort of a stagnant area for money to flow in and not flow out.
But you also see him going with Under Armour and doing the sleepwear recovery stuff. Beds. I mean, they're trying to gain an edge, especially at an older age, in anything they can gain an edge in. And some of the stuff is very bizarre, but Tom Brady, if he can make money off it, all props to him.
And speaking of bizarre, then you go to the other side, you go into the NBA. And the old man, the OB, or is it OB or OG, old guy. The old guy in the NBA is Dirk Nowitzki.
Well, he's one of them.
Yeah, for sure. And you really watch what he does in the offseason and make him great. That's weird too. He does a lot of weird workouts. He does a lot of weird, secretive, diets and all that stuff. And I think it's that not keeping to a strict, continuous regime. I think it's changing it up really helps a lot. And I think trying to strip off weight and doing a lot of load-bearing exercises. I think more pyrometrics.
A lot of the stuff you could do in your early 30s and down into your 20s, you can't do when you're over 35.
Especially if you want to be a high-end athlete.
Sense because your body is, after 30, your body just starts diminishing.
And now, I think there's different ways. So if you want to be a weightlifter, usually weightlifters and bodybuilders, their bodies don't mature into the prime of their careers until they're in their 40s. But at that point, that doesn't help with athletic ability. Being able to move, being flexible, being all that stuff, it hurts. So what we're learning is these players that are playing high impact or high activity sports and are not just going to lift to get bigger, that as they get older, plyometric, is that how you say it?
Plyometrics.
Plyometrics is really the way these players are going when it comes to body weight exercises, not putting a lot of undue stress on their joints.
You mentioned the Delos system, or explain that to me.
So it's out of Europe, and what they do is they have a weight plate at the bottom of this device. And I have to say, it looks like a Stepmaster without the steps. And what they do is they try to balance themselves continuously with this machine, trying to not shake them off like one of those riding bulls that you see at like a baseball game, but it's more of its sudden movements, and it's building their core and their balance. Because I do believe, and we've seen it when we played sports growing up, it's not that the older athletes do not have skills or speed anymore. They're not as quick. They're not as nimble on their feet. Their balance isn't quite what it used to be. And I think that's what slows people down more than anything.
Yeah, reaction time for sure. So also, let's look at Adrian Beltre, another local legend in the sports community. He's been able to play until his late 30s now. He's had some injury issues, but he has a different perspective on what keeps him young.
And I don't know what that is. I have not seen a player with his build play as long as he has before. He is not a skinny dude. Look at Tom Brady. He doesn't have a lot of size and muscle on him to hold him down. You look at Dirk Nowitzki. He's skinny too. You don't see a lot of big, powerful guys playing too close to 40 and having the ability to continue to play at a high level. We have to admit, though, some of the things that Tom Brady and Dirk are talking about do happen with Beltre. He gets injured a lot. Yeah. He pulls a lot of hamstrings. He pulls, it's a lot of nicks and little times where he's hurt himself that's keeping him from playing all year long. But yeah, he is. I think with him it's more of an enigma, the fact that I think genetically he's able to play longer because his size does not make sense.
So you don't think it's because he just loves the game and has fun and plays like a little kid?
I think that's part of it. I think keeping it young makes it so that you enjoy playing the game, and you'll play through injuries, you'll play through some things, but
age is not a number, right?
Yeah, except for when it becomes a number.
When it becomes a number.
I really do believe that as you get older, it's not, even though training and diet does have a part of it, I do think that it really is on a person-to-person basis. How many people have you met in your life, you too, that you see they're unbelievable athletes? They've got like a six-pack, and they're built, they eat healthy, and then they tear ligaments, they hurt themselves all the time, they're constantly injured, and then you see people where you say, that guy has no business playing at the level he's playing at and not getting hurt. I really think it's just based on person to person, and people really need to customize their diets and their training plans based on their body type.
They're trying everything. I mean, we're talking about cryogenic spas, we're talking about using personal trainers and having their own chefs, if they have enough money to do so, doing the
oxygen chambers,
doing the sensory deprivation chambers. I mean, massage.
What was it that T.O. did? You remember when he was coming back from his broken leg? He kept getting in those barometric chambers. Is that what it was? Where you go in and they lower
the pressure.
Yeah, the pressure inside those. It's unbelievable the kind of, in a lot of ways, the kind of desperation these last ditch efforts to stay at the top of their game as long as they can. These players are coming up with crazy stuff, which in a lot of ways helps all of us, because if you think most of the big advancements in science and technology came from stuff like the space race, where they were so desperate to get to space, they'd try anything.
Yeah, and so these athletes are so desperate, they're trying anything. Hey, if you want to go to a cryogenic chamber, you can thank professional athletes, because I'm sure before professional athletes started trying to do it,
cupping?
There was no way. Yeah, there was no way that you were going to have even access to one of these.
And you'd have to pay me to get into one of those chambers that go to like -70 degrees. Those cryo chambers.
Yes. Oh, I've done it.
Is it really that cold?
It's cold, but it's not that bad. It's not a long period of time. My difficulty would begin in one of those sensory deprivation chambers, where there is literally no sound, there's nothing going on.
You'd go nuts?
And you're supposed to lay there, for, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes in water. Yeah, just something beyond what I can even imagine ever doing when I was playing.
And then there's some players that are just naturally long-lasting. And again, I know this next position is one that does not need a ton of work and usually has a long shelf life when it comes to being an athlete, is kickers and Adam Vinatieri. Now, what Adam Vinatieri has done is he's been kicking since the late 90s, and he's still one of the best kickers in the NFL. And I think that's the testament. It's not that kickers last a long time, because I think any kicker could last a long time. It's keeping at the top of your game for that long.
Yeah.
And you don't hear a lot of stuff about Adam Vinatieri training a special way or doing, barometric chambers or pressurized chambers or sleep deprivation tanks or whatever you want to call it. You don't see that. And same with, let's see Drew Brees. He's had but he has been a health nut his whole life.
Right.
So what I think the overall conclusion to this view.
Go try everything.
Yeah. Go try everything. That's what we recommend.
Something will work.
Something will work, or you'll get your money back, but you don't take that from us. All right, when we come back, we will be talking to the A&M and Alabama reporters from two of those cities talking about their matchup coming up this weekend.
Maybe you can make retirement happen. After all, you made her college years happen. Opening that education savings account when she was little. Spearheading a campus tour. And another, and another, and another, and another. Bam! Deciphering financial aid. She was like, what? But now she's like, you aced planning for college. Now get the tips you need to get on track at aceyourretirement.org.
Welcome back to Off the Bench. We've got Reiner Sabin from AL.com on the phone right now. We're talking about the big game this weekend, A&M against Alabama in College Station. Reiner, kind of give us an overview of what Alabama looks like right now, because everybody seems to think they're the greatest team easily in the nation, and maybe there's even questions, are they the greatest team of all time?
Well, I think that might be a little bit too much to conclude at this point as far as them being the greatest of all time. They look really good after the first two SEC games, obviously beating both opponents by a combined margin of 122 points. So they've taken care of business, and they look pretty impressive in the way that they've gone about it. Just the offensive efficiency, and also just the way they played on defense, especially on third down, which was an issue in the Colorado State game, and now they've corrected that. So, this team looks good, and maybe not have the wow factor on defense that they did last year, but they're solid across the board, and the secondary is kind of carrying the load, especially for Alabama on defense, too. And then on the offense, Jalen Hurts has been playing really well. They haven't turned the ball over, which is, they're the only team in the nation not to do that, and that's been a big reason why they've been able to put teams away as quickly as they have.
In the past, A&M has been a pretty stout defense, and with you guys having a 239-yard rushing differential, do you think that this A&M team will be able to stifle that a little bit?
I think it's going to be hard. I just think, the X factor really hurts, and a lot of teams just cannot figure out how to stop him when he escapes the pocket. He's kind of he's elusive, but he's also has a lot more speed than it looks like. It looks like he's running slower than he really is, and so I think that kind of confuses teams too. So I think he's the X factor. They also have, 4 very talented running backs, and they've started to use them as receivers too. And that, again, creates issues because if a linebacker is keying on, the running back, him coming out of the, flat, it could also lead to them making adjustments on the defensive side, which could also open up running lanes going forward for Alabama. So they've really been able to utilize their weapons very well, and that, I think, has helped kind of make the running game go from beginning to end.
There's a lot of things about Jalen Hurts that reminds me of Cam Newton. Is there a way that you can make that comparison between him and Cam Newton, maybe a Cam Newton light? I understand he doesn't throw the ball as much as Cam did, but as you said and as you described it, he's a big guy, and he seems faster than he's faster than he seems, and he has those big, powerful strides, and he seems to be almost a running back at quarterback.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think that you can make a fair comparison between him and Cam Newton in that sense. You know, like you said, he hasn't thrown the ball, although those past games, they look like they were able to open it up. Again, they get a lot of, I think that has a lot to do with the fact that they get a lot of single coverage situations because of the run threat that Hurts poses. So, you know, he really makes a huge difference in the offense. And, you know, there have been fans that want to see the backup quarterback, you know, Tua Tagovailoa, you know, take over at some point, you know, which is, you know, for me is ludicrous because this guy just gets the job done and has so many more intangible aspects that he brings to the game, in the sense that he just, again, you know, poses such a threat as a runner that it really opens up things even in the passing game. So they can go to that if they need to, if the running game isn't working, which it rarely is the case. So yeah, I mean, Hurts is really a dynamic player, and certainly you know, deserves a lot of the praise that he's been getting.
Do you think that the 12th man, obviously the crowd at College Station, is going to have any effect on Hurts and the offense in this game? Because, you know, it looks like that's really about all Texas A&M is going to be able to do to get any kind of effect on this offensive attack.
Yeah, I hate to say it from Texas A&M standpoint, but I don't think it will have any impact. I mean, you know, Hurts last year went down to Death Valley at LSU. I mean, it was the loudest crowd I've ever seen, NFL or a college stadium, that I've ever been a part of and witnessed firsthand. And you know, he led them on a late scoring drive, and they won 10-0 in that game. It was kind of very much a slugfest. So, I mean, he's pretty unflappable. I mean, he's shown that throughout his career. I mean, obviously, being a freshman quarterback and leading them to the cusp of the national championship last season, he's pretty much seen everything that you need to see as a college quarterback and played on the biggest of stages. And I don't know if, I mean, Kyle Field obviously has a reputation for being a hostile environment, but he's already encountered those plenty of times.
Yeah, there's quite a few of those in the SEC, especially the SEC West.
Mm-hmm. Excuse me?
Oh, I was just saying that quite a few of the crowds in the SEC West are challenging, you know, stadiums to play at.
Sure, absolutely. And, you know, I think he's, you know, he has yet to play at Auburn, and but, you know, again, LSU is about, especially when they're playing Alabama, certainly brings the fans out, and kind of the loud atmosphere. That was a night game, so you know that the fans were raring to go, you know, for that one. And so he handled that very well, and that was a very tight talk game for all, you know, basically 55 minutes. And he didn't, you know, ever kind of show signs that he was fazed by it, and then, you know, he scored the winning touchdown. So
right.
You know, he's a very you know, impressive player under pressure, and again, I think he's got a very calm demeanor, and that serves him well in those kind of road situations.
Well, being a fellow Saban, it's probably safe to say you get the inside track with Nick Saban. Do you think, since he's had such a successful past 10 years with them and so many championships, and probably is going to go down as the best college coach of all time when it comes to victories, of championships, can you see him possibly hanging it up in the near future, or do you think he's going to ride this thing out until the whole thing falls apart?
Well, I don't think I don't know if it'll ever fall apart under his watch. However, I mean, I don't think he's going to step aside anytime soon. He just signed a long-term contract extension, so he'll likely be around here for a while. And you know, they really looked. You know, they've had 7 straight #1 recruiting classes, and the fact is that the team, I mean, the freshmen that they have on the roster that are really now kind of reserve players look very good in the times that they have played this year. So, I mean, the way the program's set up for the future looks pretty darn good, too. So, I mean, really have much of a reason. And he said repeatedly in the offseason that he can't imagine not being around a team sport or team activity. So he's probably here for the long term.
Also, this weekend, looking at their schedule, this is going to be one of their biggest games. If they win at College Station against Texas A&M, do they cement themselves as the SEC West champions? And then also looking at the playoffs, do they cement themselves as probably the #1 seed in the college football playoff picture?
I don't know if this game really has that kind of impact this early in the season. I think Auburn, it could come down to the Auburn game, the Iron Bowl for Alabama. They right now, at first glance, Auburn looks like they might be the closest team that can challenge Alabama in the SEC West. They seem to have picked themselves up after the Clemson loss, which was no real big shame because Clemson looks pretty good and looks like they're a national championship contender. So I think that it could come down to that last week, depending on what Auburn does. But Alabama looks like the kind of clear-cut favorite, certainly in the SEC right now.
Do they? This would be our last question with you. Do a lot of people behind the scenes or that are covering directly Alabama, do they really see this coming down to possibly a rematch of last year of Clemson versus Alabama in the championship?
Do they see a rematch?
Yeah, a rematch
again. Well, I don't know. It's too tough to say. Just looking from afar, it seems like a possibility, but it hasn't really been much of a talk amongst behind the scenes. I think basically we don't know as much about Clemson certainly as we do about Alabama, so it's hard to to gauge whether they'll be in the running at the end. I think Alabama's certainly going to be in position just based on what I've seen and the way the schedule shapes up going forward for the Tide. But it's hard to say if Clemson is, but it looks like that based on their schedule, they have a very good chance of making it back to the college football playoff too.
Great. And when we come back, we will be getting the Texas A&M side.
Marie, you have prediabetes.
Prediabetes? I don't have time to eat right or exercise. I'm a busy mom.
Oh, you're a busy mom.
Yeah.
This is great news. Busy moms never get prediabetes.
Wait, what?
Yeah, this is all the people at risk for prediabetes, and way over here, busy moms. No?
We're here with Travis Brown from the Bryan College Station Eagle. Travis, what do you think of this season so far? There's been a lot of talk about Kevin Sumlin's fate, especially after a Week 1 loss, even though it was close, and now they're 4-1 and could easily have been 5-0. Give us some background. What's the talk down there?
Well, I think that the sudden uptick of A&M through the Arkansas game, going 2-0 in SEC play, that's kind of at least quelled the talks of the firing Kevin Sumlin for a little bit at least. I think that people are curious to see how this will roll on through SEC play and see what he will be able to do with the rest of the SEC. It's a weird year for the SEC this year. You have Alabama and then kind of everyone else. And I think most A&M fans thought that with what they were returning and some question marks, some young players on the team, things might not necessarily go their way. But if you look across the SEC, if you look at some of the teams that were supposed to be powerhouses this year, like LSU and then Mississippi State, because they beat LSU and a lot of these SEC West schools, it kind of looks like there could be an opening for a young A&M team to maybe slide in and grab a few more wins than they thought they might be able to. And then that begs the question of what does happen to Kevin Sumlin, because there was a lot of momentum down here to go ahead and find that next coach for next season. And if he somehow manages to squeak out of the season with with 9 wins and he beats LSU, that makes things curious. I still think that there is the odds are against him right now, and I don't necessarily think that this is still an A&M team that can make it to 9 wins. But I think that as the season is shaped up and as you start to look at what the SEC West actually holds this year, he has better odds than when he started the season. I guess
we've discussed this in a previous show. We really compare Sumlin to Mike Tomlin of the Steelers. We feel that he's a really emotionally driven guy in the sense that the team feeds off his emotion. He's not as Bill Belichick as a lot of coaches like a Nick Saban, where he's this even keel all the time, all work, no play. Seems like Kevin Sumlin is more of a player's coach. Do you think that has hindered him as well as given him some really positive years since he's been there, where the team is fed off of him, and when he's really struggling, they also feed off his emotion of being down?
It's interesting because while someone has a pretty big hand on everything, he is definitely a walk-around head coach. So when you go to the practices and you see the warm-ups and stuff, most of the energy from the team comes from the assistants. And really, right now, a lot of the team's energy and a lot of their emotion comes from the strength staff. They just brought in Mark Hockey, a new strength and conditioning coach, who brought in his whole team. He was a guy that was an assistant at Alabama in their strength program a little bit back, and had some other stops before coming here. And man, that guy never stops. He is just a ball of energy running around. And so I think that when you talk about where the team gets its energy and gets its emotion, I don't necessarily think that's Kevin Sumlin's role. I do agree with you. I think he is somewhat of a player's coach, and I think that he's not necessarily the get in your face. But I think the day-to-day operations of the team in regards to the emotion, the guidance, everything, I think he delegates that pretty well to his assistants.
And I know another challenge they have right now is they're starting a lot of freshmen. Can you kind of get into kind of the advantages and disadvantages of playing freshmen this year, because you're coming up on a big game here, and usually freshmen aren't, especially this far into the season, probably aren't too starry-eyed, and they may play considerably different than what most people would expect a team going in and playing against Alabama would play.
Hey, that's been a strength of this Sumlin regime at A&M is recruiting pretty game-ready athletes that are true freshmen. I mean, they've played 18 true freshmen this season and 11 redshirt freshmen through the first 5 games. That is a lot, and most of them have seemed decently game-ready. I mean, you have Kellen Mond, true freshman at starting quarterback. Before him, for the first half of the A&M's first game at UCLA, it's Nate Starkle, who is a redshirt freshman. One of their leading wide receivers is Jamon Osmond, who's a true freshman, and there's true freshmen just all over the place. And they've been able to get the job done. Yes, there's been growing pains. Yes, when you look at like Kellen Mond at quarterback and you look at the offense they're running this year compared to that they ran with Trevor Knight last year, it is very vanilla. It's very tailored to a quarterback who's still trying to learn the system. But I think while yes, there are some growing pains on the field, there are some clock management issues sometimes when you have a freshman quarterback in there. There are some drop ball issues with some of these freshman wide receivers. They've done what they needed to do to win ball games, and I think that because of that, the future does look brighter for A&M. And that, going back to what we talked about earlier, that bodes well for Kevin Sumlin and his coaching staff, because I think that while everyone was convinced this was going to be a straight rebuilding year, it hasn't necessarily been that. Yes, they've had to retool at some positions, but they've done what they needed to get the job done, and that's basically all you can ask for in true freshmen.
Going along those same lines of starting so many freshmen, What happened to the last couple draft classes? You know, usually you do not see, you know, someone like an A&M who has a high recruitment level because they're a name brand in college football. What has been the problem? Why have they had to start so many freshmen where the last couple draft classes recruiting classes not turn out the way they thought, or did players leave, or what has been the issue? Why so many freshmen?
This has kind of been my own personal opinion on this, because I think that's the $100,000 question of this program is, yes, they've had some of the top recruiting classes in the country since someone's been here, but it hasn't necessarily translated into a lot of wins. And then when you look back at a lot of the recruiting classes, not a lot of them are still in College Station. They've transferred out and gone other places. I think that there's two ways to look at recruiting. You can recruit for all the stars that the recruiting services put on players, and try to have the best recruiting class you possibly can just by pulling in all the best players and make what is in essence like a Pro Bowl team or an NBA All-Star team. Or you can try to now do those, but draft a team, draft players that work in your system, that buy into your program, that have that A&M was their number one first always pick, or pick whatever school. I think some schools you have you had your Baylors and your TCUs and some of those schools in the Big 12 have done a good job. Look at Washington State up there with what Mike Leach is doing. You have players that aren't necessarily the top ranked guys, but are going in and fit well into the program, buy into the system, buy into the school, and are good and ultimately form a cohesive, solid team. And I don't know if necessarily A&M has done a great job of recruiting a team as much as they've recruited really highly touted players. And I think that sometimes can come back to bite you a little bit, because once some of these players maybe aren't in the playing time or don't trust the process that the coaching staff is putting for them for their career, they're off to the next best big thing because it didn't seem to work out for them like they thought. And that's just my opinion on that, but I think that there might be something to that when you look at how A&M's past recruiting classes have shaken out.
Yeah, also looking at this weekend's match, you got Alabama coming in. Alabama looks like clearly the class of college football right now, and they're looking to cement their position in the playoff, in the college football playoff. What can A&M do that could challenge Alabama this weekend?
Well, the thing that they have to do that Alabama has absolutely not been able to, not relented whatsoever, is A&M has to get some turnovers. Alabama hasn't given up a turnover this season, and A&M's defense has thrived on turning the ball over. And I think that they're going to have a hard enough time with a decently inexperienced secondary on defense, stopping Alabama, just getting pure 3-and-outs, forcing punts, even maybe forcing field goals. They're going to have to get some turnovers. So if A&M has a chance in this, they're going to have to get Alabama to turn the ball over, and I don't necessarily know that is an obtainable task for them.
Yeah, we haven't seen much of that so far this season from Alabama.
And Alabama, and this was a stat that Rick brought up earlier, Alabama has a 239-yard rushing differential between them and the rest of the teams they've played. And, A&M has been, in the past, one of their staples have been a tough defense, one that players cannot run against. And they've only had, one 100-yard rusher this year? They've kept most under 100 yards. Do you think they're going to be that effective against against Alabama?
They're going to have to be, because with Telemon at quarterback, he's shown sparks of being able to really move the offense with his arm, but it hasn't necessarily been consistent. What has been mostly consistent for the Aggies, save for a half here and there, is their ability to run the ball, and their running back core is very deep. Really, the guy that stepped up and been the workhorse for them has been Keith Ford, the transfer from Oklahoma, who definitely has the physicality to match up with Alabama's defensive defensive front and has the breakaway speed if he can get away. Travion Williams was their 1,000-yard rusher from last year, first true freshman for A&M to rush for 1,000 yards. And he's been a little dinged up. He hasn't been above probably about 75%, I think he said a week or two ago so far. And he hasn't seen as many carries as probably had the year before. But then you have a guy in Kendall Bussey who has stepped up, and he basically sealed the deal and won the Nicholls State game for A&M a couple of weeks ago, and he's the third-string running back. So, if A&M's going to win games at all this year, whether it be Alabama or anybody, there's no qualms about it. They're going to have to be able to run the ball to pull it off. I mean, you talk to their offensive linemen, and they said that they've known that from before the season started. So if A&M has a chance, yes, they're going to have to be able to find a way to run the ball because while Mons has the ability to be a good passer, he's not quite there yet in the consistency portion of that, and they're going to have to run the ball.
Yeah, I think he's going to have to show some more polish as the season goes on if A&M expects to get out with 8 or 9 wins in the SEC. This is going to be a tough game for them, and let's just say they drop it, they go to 4-2. What would be the expectation getting to the end of the season, and does that support Sumlin staying at A&M?
Like I said, before the season started, I said that they were going to have to at least win 9 games and beat LSU or Alabama. At this point, that's like I said earlier, that's muddy because 9 wins might be more obtainable, but the competition is probably down a little bit this year. And if you throw in a win that LSU is now a game that I think is a must win, is a should win from what A&M has shown this year. So I think the goal as of this point is, any college football program has to get to 6 wins to get to a bowl game because that bowl practice that you're allotted by going to a bowl game is so valuable, especially with a young team. I think that getting to a bowl game is of the utmost importance for this team because I think, of course, if you miss a bowl, then Kevin Sumlin's tenure at A&M is probably done. But beyond that, they have to show something. I think if Kellen Mond can continue to improve and prove that he is the number 1 guy in the future of this program and has moves his way up the passing charts in the SEC before the season's over, that could be enough to maybe save someone's job because there is a direction. I think the past couple of years when you go 8-5 3 years in a row and you're cycling in quarterbacks and you don't necessarily the waters around the ship that is this program are tumultuous all the time, that's when it's easy to make a change. But when you see a direct course, when you see that you have a quarterback, when the running back depth, young running back depth is really improved, when you have a whole new fold of wide receivers that are going to be around for 2 years at least, and to have someone to replace the Christian Kirks and those kind of guys, that might do something. So I think it's a little bit less now about the numbers. Again, I think he has to win 9 games still. But I think if there is a direct course and there is a future that you can see with some of the players that are coming in here, that would do him some wonders about keeping the job.
Well, my last question is that since basically the offense of Texas A&M is predicated around the running game, and since someone has been there, we've seen a real need for him to commit or bring in recruits at the quarterback position that are dual threats. You had Menzel, you had Trevor Knight last year, you have Mond this year, or Mond. If this team is ever going to get away from the fact that if the running game starts to struggle, that they're going to have the ability to throw, do you think you ever see in the near future, as long as someone's there, they ever bring back a typical running quarterback, someone who stays in the pocket, throws, goes through the reads, isn't looking to first read no, second read no, take off. Do you see a pattern that maybe they might be leaning towards bringing in a more conventional running or quarterback?
I think that has almost even less to do about A&M and more to do about just the whole college football landscape. If you look around the country and look at some of the best quarterbacks out there, some of the most highly touted quarterbacks, they're guys that have that dual threat ability. Now, granted, with what you were saying, most of these guys, when you look at the Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson and even the Jared Stidhams at Auburn, they are much better passers than Kellen Mond or Trevor Knight. But I think that most of these offensive coordinators, with the systems that they want to run, with this run-pass option kind of air raid offense that's so prevalent around the country, you have to have a quarterback that's able to do both. And so I really think that the days of the prototypical pocket passer in college football are limited, because it's kind of like trying to get into college baseball and just being a really good hitter and having a weak defense. I mean, if there's someone else that's out there that is above average at both of those, they might go for that guy instead of just you, because they're just able to do more. They help the team in more ways, and running those different kinds of options, you have to be able to use your legs. So it would surprise me. I think it always surprises me when I see any team that is really successful with what you consider a prototypical pro-style pocket passer quarterback, because I just don't know if that's how they're developing quarterbacks anymore from the youngest levels.
Well, with that, thank you for an amazing interview. When we get back, we talk to Rick Gosselin.
Yeah.
And we hope to have you back soon, Travis.
Yep, thanks, Travis.
Anytime, guys. Always enjoy it.
I'm Rick Collins from Off the Bench, and with me today is Rick Gosselin from the Talk of Fame Network and from the Dallas Morning News as a columnist. Rick, talking about the Dallas Cowboys coming into this year after going 13-3 last year, fantastic year in the rookie year of Zeke and Dak. This year hasn't gone so smoothly so far. 2 out of 4 have been losses, and when you compare, we've got 4 games in, we've lost 2, and last year we only lost 3. What's the big difference right now? Is it the offense?
Well, first off, it's the schedule. Last year, the Cowboys played a last place schedule, and you went from 4th to 1st because you're playing easier teams, easier opponents. You had Tampa, you had Chicago on there. This year on the schedule, you've added all the first place teams. Atlanta's there, Green Bay's there, Seattle's there. You're going to play better quarterbacks. Jared Goff is a year better now this year. So start with the schedule. I didn't think any way they could get to 13-3 given the tougher schedule. I thought 10-6 would win this division, and I thought it'd be competitive with all 3 of the other teams. Now, what's going on this year is some of the best coaching in the NFL is on the defensive side of the ball. They had a whole off season to look at tape of the Cowboys and what they did last year with Prescott and Elliott. Now they decided, here's how we stop the Cowboys. We do not let Elliott run. We make Prescott throw the ball from the pocket to beat us. And they've also decided, last week we saw in particular, take away Witten and Beasley and make Dak throw it down the field. And he struggled with his accuracy, and he struggled with his chemistry with his wide receivers. And that's a big part of the problem. Also, I don't think they're as committed to the run as they were last year.
Right.
For the Cowboys to succeed last year, they ran the ball, they controlled the ball a league-high 33 minutes a game. They took the pressure off a rookie quarterback and a defense that lacked playmakers and a pass rush. This year, the time of possession is 28 minutes. They're asking a very young defense to play 32 minutes a game, and this team cannot win if that defense is on the field more than 30 minutes a game.
Yeah, and you saw early on in week 1 against the Giants that the defense stepped up and made plays. to me, after a few games, it looks like that's more about the Giants' offense, and we're looking at how the Giants have progressed, and they haven't yet this year. And that was more about their offense and struggles than it was about how good the Dallas Cowboys defense was. And that allowed the Cowboys offense to stay on the field more. In the last 3 games, that's really reversed for the Cowboys. Yeah. And, we talked about, is Dak going to have a sophomore struggle this year? Is Zeke going to struggle this year? Both of them have struggled, but it does look like it's more about the fact that we have a much tougher schedule, and our defense isn't nearly as good as maybe we thought it was after week 1.
Well, because of the time that they're on the field. Also, when they played Arizona, they had a good defensive game. Again, Arizona has a subpar offensive line. If the Dallas defensive front is more talented than the blocking front, they're going to have a good games. That wasn't the case last week against the Rams. The Packers this week have a couple injuries. Both their tackles are missing. This may favor the Cowboys. By and large, it all comes back to the offensive line. They had what was many perceived as the best offensive line in football last year. 2 starters are gone. Ron Leary, who was a great run blocker, went to Denver. Doug Free retired. And I think they really miss Free. We saw that last week when Wade Phillips, the coordinator of the Rams, defense coordinator, he took Michael Brockers, who was his nose tackle, and put him over Free, or right. over Leo Collins. And they said, this is going to be the doorway to the pocket. We can beat Leo Collins. They beat him with a big physical player. And I think other coaches are going to see that, and I think that's going to be the matchup going forward. How do you protect Leo Collins? You're going to have to keep a tight end over there to Chip to help him out in the pass blocking, because if he struggles like he did against the Rams, the Cowboys are going to struggle.
So in terms of looking at the rest of the season, we've had a difficult 4 weeks in terms of the defenses that we've played against. Right. The schedule doesn't get a whole lot easier, but we do have some little pockets here where we're not playing against a top 5 defense in the league. Do you see the Cowboys being able to get on a roll? Because I think what they need is some momentum going into Thanksgiving, and then seeing where we're at then with the division.
Well, it depends what you consider a roll. See, I think 10-6 wins the division. I don't think you're looking at 13-3. I think you got to find a survive heading into December. You got to be within striking distance in December. They got some games coming up with the Eagles and the Redskins. And my concern with this division is the Eagles and Redskins are both playing great defense, and the Cowboys are not. And both the Eagles and Redskins right now, their quarterbacks are playing better than the Cowboys quarterback. And you win in this league with quarterback and pass rush. And right now, the Eagles and Redskins are better than the Cowboys.
Yeah. Also, looking at the Cowboys defense especially, we've got a young secondary. We have a young front 4 who have played very well against offensive lines that have struggled. We have some injuries, though. And do you see Sean Lee's injury impacting them further down the line? Is he going to be able to get back quick enough to make a difference? And then also in the secondary with Orlando Scandrick injury issues and a bunch of young players, when we're playing against Kirk Cousins and we're playing against Carson Wentz, those attacks down the field, do you see some major issues there?
Yeah, I think you're going to get both Lee and Hitchens back. Now, you've got the Packers, and you got a winless 49ers, and you got the bye. I wouldn't be in a rush to get them back, because the next 4 games after the bye are going to determine where the Cowboys are. They got Philadelphia, Washington, Atlanta. They got some tough Kansas City. They got some very tough teams in there. They need Lee and Hitchens healthy for those games. I think we saw the absence of Lee last week was huge. Todd Gurley ran wild. They had no answers for Todd Gurley. You need Sean Lee on the field. Without Sean Lee, there's not a leader on that defense. Jalen Smith is wearing the helmet cam. I think if you take it back even further, the guy they really miss is Barry Church. When they let him go, he was the kind of the glue guy. He knew what everybody's doing. He held the whole thing together at the back end of the defense. Well, he's gone now. And they got Jeff Heath and Byron Jones back there, young guys. So they need to get Lee back in there because they need a leader. Right now, they don't have a leader on the field. And Lee also is their best playmaker on defense. When you take away his leadership and his playmaking abilities, this defense is going to struggle.
Yeah, and obviously, you're always going to miss your middle linebacker when he's injured.
Right.
Let's look at the rest of the league. Right now in the NFC, as you mentioned, we got a lot of good teams, and the schedule in the NFC is really difficult. We don't really know. There's a lot of parity. We don't know who the best team is necessarily right now. You look at the top of the pack, the Packers aren't even in the top 5 right now in the NFC in terms of standings. The AFC is clearer. Do you see in the NFC that there are clearly the best teams and potential contenders for Super Bowl?
Well, I think you may have seen one of the contenders last week. I would not be surprised if the Rams win that division. They've got all the pieces in place. Seattle's got some injuries. Seattle can't run the ball. They lost another running back the other day. I would not be surprised if the Rams win that division. So you've seen one of the best teams. Green Bay is favored in the North. I mean, you're going to see another Super Bowl contender for the second consecutive week.
Yeah.
In the South, I think the South is the most competitive, best division of football. You look at that division, they've got, all 4 of the teams have elite quarterbacks. 3 of them have past MVPs. Saints have Drew Brees, Atlanta has Matt Ryan, Carolina has Nate Newton, and Tampa's got the guy that's up and coming, Jameis Winston. I wouldn't be surprised if Tampa wins that division.
Yeah.
So I think there are good teams in the NFC, but I don't think you're going to see a 14-2 or 13-3 team. I think you may have an 11-5 team that winds up playing the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think Jameis Winston has the chance of becoming an MVP in this league as well, talent-wise. A very Cam Newton-esque player, but with a better arm, is what a lot of people are saying.
And also this year, better weapons.
Yeah.
You go out and draft O.J. Howard, who was the best tight end in college football. You signed Deshaun Jackson. And he's got Mike Evans, Deshaun Jackson, Cameron Brate, O.J. Howard. He's got 4 great weapons on every pass play.
And Doug Martin coming back,
and
I
Doug
believe,
Martin
this
coming
week.
back. If they can run the football and protect that defense some, they still need a pass rush. They've got 1 sack in 3 games. They need to rush the passer if they want to take the next step as a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah. How about the AFC? We're looking at, we always thought, okay, it's the Pats, it'll be Pittsburgh and the Pats when it comes down to the AFC Championship game. Right now, neither of those teams have clearly defined themselves as the best team in the AFC. The Kansas City Chiefs are the only undefeated team in football right now. Are they a contender? And if not, who are the contenders in the AFC?
Well, they were a contender last year. I mean, they won the West last year, very competitive West last year. Right now, Alex Smith is playing the best quarterback of his life. You know, Kareem Hunt is the best running back in the NFL. That defense has always gotten sacks and takeaways. I think Kansas City will be there at the end. You know, you look at the Patriots, they were 2-2, but in 2014, they also were 2-2 when they won the Super Bowl. They, however, have some huge defensive issues. They've given up the most yards and the second most points in the league. They're on a pace to give up over 500 points this season. There have only been 2 teams in history that made the Super Bowl that had allowed over 400 points. So they got some issues, but you got Tom Brady, just like the Packers have Aaron Rodgers. I like Pittsburgh. They're playing defense like they did back in the 90s under Bill Cowher. They've got the best quarterback, running back, wide receiver tandem in football in Roethlisberger, Le'Veon Bell, and Antonio Brown. So, yeah, Pittsburgh, I think, is going to be there at the end. You can see Pittsburgh, and I still think New England. I don't think that division will press them. I think they can win 11 games, win that division. And if they get in January, don't bet against Tom Brady.
So Trevor Siemian, are you counting him, the Broncos, out because of the quarterback in Denver, or do you think they have a shot?
You win in this league with a quarterback and a pass rush. And they've got the pass rush, but Trevor Siemian, they kept waiting for Paxton Lynch to win that job. Yeah. He hasn't done that. I still like Kansas City in that division. Right now, Alex Smith is playing better quarterback than anybody in football, including Brady and Rodgers. They can run the ball. They can block. They're the most complete team going. Right now, if you rank this league, there's Kansas City, and then stack them any way you want after Kansas City.
Yeah, and in fact, a lot of people are saying you have to take away the name that they've given to Alex Smith as a field manager, a game manager, a team manager. He's a high-level quarterback now in this league. You can't call him that.
He was
anymore.
The first overall pick of a draft. He was a high-level quarterback coming in. But now you've given him, this year you've given him Kareem Hunt. And defenses have to stop the running back. And that's taken the pressure off Smith. He has more time to throw. He's a smart guy, and he's got some weapons downfield. Tyreek Hill is an explosive weapon. And this is a good team. This is the most balanced team in football right now. And again, I would not be surprised to see them there at the end.
Yeah, and then lastly, I wanted to get in one of your articles that I found absolutely fascinating, which was, is age the enemy of the NFL? And can you give us a quick kind of history of the change of age in the NFL, and then also just kind of go into how that is affecting the play in the league overall?
Okay, you ask any coach in football, he wants a veteran player in his lineup. He wants a guy who does not make mistakes, a guy that does not make the critical mistake that will cost him a game. But when the salary cap came in, that all changed. You can't pay everybody $3 million. So the guys that end up leaving are the older guys, the supporting cast type older guys, the offensive linemen, defensive linemen, linebacker, safeties. They move on, and you replace them with younger guys. So 10 years ago, in 2007, there were 350 players 30 years of age and over on NFL rosters. Now there are 100 fewer players 30 and older. Back in 2007, there were 190 starters over the age of 30. Now there are 125. There's 65, 66 fewer starters than back then. So you're seeing a lot more mistakes.
Yeah.
These young players are learning the game as they're playing. They're not fundamentally sound, and the play has been very, very ragged. And it's because as a player gets older, you have to pay him more money. The minimum wage for a 10-year player is $1 million a year. So you're better off keeping a 6th-round draft pick and paying him $475, $500 than keeping a $1 million player. Because if you're going to give quarterbacks these $100 million contracts, the bottom half of your roster is going to pay the price.
Gotta take a cut.
Someone's got to go, and it's the older players that go. So you got a lot of young players. This is the youngest the NFL has ever been, both in roster and in starting lineup. And you see it on the field for the first 8-9 weeks. It's going to be very ragged. You're going to see a lot of mistakes, a lot of penalties till all these young guys figure it out.
Well, I was really impressed with the research on the project. I did a little research of my own and found that the penalties have increased consistently year over year since 2009 up until 2017. There was a little blip in 2013, but we've seen a 16% increase in penalties. And I wonder if, I am almost for sure that injuries have increased because of the change in age being one of those pieces to why injuries are occurring more often. You said fundamentals, and fundamentals are the way that you decrease the chance of injury. So you lack fundamentals, you have more injuries. I'm wondering if that penalties increase is also associated with the average age decreasing in the NFL.
Well, back in 2007, there were, I think it's 55 offensive linemen that were over the age of 30 starting. These guys know how to block, know how to protect. Now it's down to, it's in the 20s. And right now there are going to be 200 more penalties on the offensive line than there were in 2007. It's because young guys are learning the craft, and they will hold. They will do things that the older guys won't. The older guys won't get away with. Also, referees look at the younger guys.
Yeah.
You know, you let a guy, a 10, 12-year veteran at center, they're not going to touch him. He knows what he's doing. But you put a rookie in at center, he's more likely to get a flag for holding than a 12-year guy.
Interesting. Well, next time, Rick, we'll talk some more Cowboys as the season progresses, and hopefully we'll get some more wins under the belt. And we'll be looking at playoffs. Hopefully we'll be talking about it next time.